Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 530 News.
A rainy Friday. What's ahead for the weekend? You'll definitely want to see the forecast. A Montana State All-American hoping to hear his name called in the NFL draft. And a highly contagious bird flu shows up in Billings.
Once they jump species, then typically it becomes transmission to human.
It's deadly for birds, but what do people need to know about it? We're taking a closer look tonight. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. The highly contagious bird flu sweeping the country has now been transmitted to humans. Colorado today reported the nation's first case. An inmate at a correctional facility tested positive after being exposed to several birds that contracted the virus. Arlena Howder takes a closer look at the threat to humans. This as Zoo Montana takes precautions to keep its birds from getting infected.
Zoo Montana is taking precautions as the bird flu spreads across the state. Not only is the virus highly contagious and dangerous to chickens like these, it's also transmissible to humans. It's a virus that has many chirping. And now the highly pathogenic avian influenza sweeping the country is killing birds here in Billings.
Because there are wild turkeys that roam our woods here, we're mindful of that.
Jeff Ewald is the executive director of Zoo Montana, which is now taking precautions against bird flu, putting up netting to protect its birds and chickens.
We're trying to keep the peacocks as close to the barn as we can, and we're monitoring that pretty closely.
This after 7 turkeys were found dead near MSU Billings. The 3 carcasses tested for bird flu came back positive.
We certainly will do everything we can to keep our birds safe, and that means moving the bird debris indoors. We will do that.
1 or 2 chickens getting in contact with an infected bird from somewhere else can easily pass it on to all these other birds because they're all crowded in a very tight space.
Dr. Neil Koo is an infectious disease specialist at Billings Clinic. He says it's not just birds potentially at risk for the highly contagious virus. The U.S. also just saw its first case of the avian flu in humans in Colorado.
A person who was identified having it was involved in culling the birds who were infected down in a poultry farm.
Luckily, the man has only experienced fatigue, but it's an example of the virus mutating in perfect conditions, allowing for human transmission. Passing it from person to person can happen much more easily, and contracting avian flu is no different than contracting influenza.
Someone touch a bird who has it and then rub our mucosa, rather their nose or eyes.
Dr. Koo says if you do see dead chickens or poultry acting strangely, don't touch them and give DPHHS a call so you know exactly what you're dealing with. And back at Zoo Montana, that's exactly what staff here are doing. A virus being closely watched as it continues to spread. In Billings, Alina Howder, MTN News.
Charges are expected to be filed soon after a hit-and-run driver took a wild ride through a neighborhood near Highland Elementary earlier this week in Billings, smashing several vehicles and nearly hitting some students. The driver, who police say was under the influence and in a stolen truck, plowed into a bike rack at the school before finally coming to a stop. 2 of the students who had their bikes demolished received a special surprise this afternoon. The St. Vincent Healthcare Foundation gave bicycles to 2 of the Highland students. No one was injured Tuesday. Police and the district court say charges in the case could be coming soon.
Hello everybody, meteorologist Matthew Hidalgo here filling in for Ed McIntosh tonight. So showers across the region, they did start earlier today. Here's the additional precipitation expected through early tomorrow. Could see 1/10 of an inch to 2/10 of an inch from Billings west, but as we move more east into the eastern plains here, we could see accumulations a bit greater, up to a 1/2 inch or even up to an inch in some areas, especially along the Montana-Dakota border, Baker down to Ekalaka and even into Broadus. Now this is mainly for the rain. There are some areas getting some snow here, watches and warnings. This purple shaded area here, the Pryor and Bighorn Mountains, could see this chance of snow up until early tomorrow. 6 to 10 inches are expected, so travel could become a bit difficult. Visibility could be limited at times, so just be cautious if you are going to be out and about. Now these showers are going to continue to move east through the evening tonight, so make sure to stick around. We'll take a look at that satellite and radar with the full forecast details coming up in just a bit.
All eyes have been on Russia and its invasion of Ukraine. Today, new missile strikes in Kyiv have some wondering if it's in response to President Biden's request for a new massive humanitarian and military package. And now some are shifting their focus to China's relationship with Russia and how China has reacted to the invasion. MTN's Jane McDonald sits down with former United States Ambassador to China, Max Baucus, and other experts to learn more about the relationship.
Russia and Putin have captured the world's attention, but what role has China been playing these last couple of months?
China really has been unwilling to join the international condemnation of the invasion.
Dexter Roberts lived and reported in China for over 2 decades and has written a book about the country.
When I listen to messages coming out of Beijing, they seem to be pretty consistent. And what they're saying is Russia as almost being a victim here.
He explains that from China's perspective, they saw Putin's back pushed against a wall because of Western NATO influence.
They see a parallel with the U.S. presence in the Asia Pacific, and particularly the U.S. relationship with Taiwan.
It is unclear if China knew about the invasion beforehand, but as Ambassador Max Baucus puts it,
but China cares more about China than it does about Putin's, so it's very complex.
As for the U.S. relationship with China, and Russia for that matter, Ambassador Baucus thinks a sophisticated and consistent approach is needed.
All the name calling by the United States, by the way, doesn't help either. The word enemy comes up. Well, the more we criticize China publicly, call the enemy, I'm telling you, the more they're to be our enemy, the more it's going to be difficult.
People gathered at the Museum of the Rockies or logged in online to listen and ask questions, such as the reaction China had to the invasion.
They were quite shocked to see the level of resistance from the Ukrainians and the inability of Russia to finish this off.
To the effect this war may have on Montanans, specifically in agriculture.
Well, short term for Montana farmers is great. The prices are way up. That's the cruel irony often of war.
They both agree that the U.S. will always have ties with China, and the big question is how to treat the relationship moving forward. In Bozeman, Jane McDonald, MTN News.
I'm Tim McGonigal in Phillips County. One of the stops on Governor Greg Gianforte's 56-county tour of Montana. On Friday, he kicked things off in Malta. He met with a group of local entrepreneurs. They had heard the expression, "There's no place like home," and they took heed.
Once we had our kids, we knew we eventually wanted to get back to this area.
One by one, Malta residents and business leaders told the governor why they decided to come back to Malta. Their reasons range from yearning for small-town security to taking over the family business, which is what Julie Snellman did.
I just don't think you know the value of the small town until you come back.
After going to college in Bozeman and running a business in Whitehall, she and her husband moved back 15 years ago. And she eventually took the reins of her parents' furniture and carpet store.
Best decision. My husband loves his job. We have 2 children. They're in 5th grade, a boy and a girl. And, you know, they can walk home from school. They can walk down to the furniture store. We have support with our family and with the friends that we've made. There's a great community of people here our age. I just could not have thought it would be as good as it is.
Just a great overlay piece, and she is $59.99.
That community spirit was evident when JCPenney closed and a group of civic leaders formed a co-op in hopes of keeping a high-quality clothing store in Malta. It was the beginning of Family Matters, and despite a pandemic, business is booming.
Last year was a record year, 2021. Our sales were up 25% from 2020 with COVID. That includes being shut down in 2020 we were shut down for 6 weeks.
During the pandemic, Family Matters business plan shifted to Facebook Lives, which they still do. In April of 2020, the online marketing technique generated $40,000 in sales, according to Sorensen. In Malta, Tim McGonigal, MTN News.
Lockwood residents in need of medical care no longer need to drive to one of Billings' 2 hospitals. You can now get help by visiting Lockwood schools. SCL Health opened a new primary care clinic on Lockwood Schools campus. That clinic is the first in that community and will not only be utilized by students, but by the Lockwood community, which is home to about 9,000 residents now. The facility will offer x-rays, sports physicals, immunizations, and other preventative care. The nearly 8,000 square foot clinic is open 5 days a week from 7 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. We'll head on the MTN News at 5:30 here on Q2. Good news for concert goers, including several announcements here in Billings lately. But have you seen those ticket prices? The reason people are having to shell out more than ever. And as the PBR gets underway in Billings, one of Montana's great rodeo stars getting some special recognition in his hometown of Red Lodge.